Welcome to the Dance Reel podcast. I'm Kate Histon-Behrend. To be part of our community, subscribe or follow this channel. This episode was sponsored by Master Dancer Mindset. Know yourself, be yourself, and express yourself on and off the stage. Hi everyone, and thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Dance Reel podcast. I wanted to share a few thoughts following the episode with the wonderful Chasta Hamilton. It was a powerful episode that sparked a really important dialogue. If you haven't watched that episode, I encourage you to go and watch it now. Not all competitions are for all dancers. Now, for those that are listening that do run a competitive dance program that maybe your students are performing in Eisteddfods or competitions all year round, or if you're a parent or dancer actively involved in the competition scene, I want to say that I'm not here to discourage that path. I think competition is a valuable experience when approached with care and intention. So in this episode, I want to share what worked for me when I had my studio. And if you're navigating on how to manage the culture around competitions, especially as a studio owner, I hope some of these ideas might help. So I would open up auditions for students to come and try out for the competition team. And I would call them the Dance Dynamics representatives because they were representing our school at the end of the year for the following year. After that audition, we would then inform those that were ready to be a part of the team, and those that weren't, we encouraged further training or gave help on what they may need to work on and develop. And usually it was having a level of classical technique and a foundation within that. That was important for me. Then I would have a list of the Eisteddfods we would perform throughout the year, the costs involved, the expectations of students. For example, ideally you don't want to just have a day off if you're just not feeling like coming to dance. That's not part of that high level training. So it was recommended that you only have so many days off per year for that class. And obviously that's if you're sick or if there's an emergency. And we would encourage families to stick to the holiday period for taking their holidays. Then within that, there was a contract, and this was mainly for the parents. And so they had to read what our expectations were as a school. And it all had to do with positive sportsmanship behaviour and expectations. So my goal was to always constantly try to manage expectations through educating in what we can expect from competitions and also why we're entering. What are we getting out of that as a school? We only participated in 3, maximum 4 a year, and that was it. I didn't want to have a school culture that fostered a highly competitive atmosphere. So that was the way I managed it. And then those that did solos, if they wanted to go on and do more competitions, that was on them. So parents would have to read through this little contract and sign it, and the student would also have to sign it. And the big thing for me was the expectations, be well mannered. And I also had the philosophy with my students, if you don't know how to quote unquote lose, if you don't know how to lose, you don't deserve to win, because I wanted to train them in navigating their feelings of disappointment. And that was part of the process too. It wasn't just about winning, it was about how can you navigate through feelings of disappointment and come out the other side and reignite and re-inspire. So I always was quite fascinated with that process. And as I said to Chasta, I don't have the answer. I just know what worked for me. And I absolutely love that she worked out what worked for her. And if you go back and listen to that episode, she's incredibly smart. She didn't make her decision purely on an emotional impulse. She felt the emotional impulse and it building, but then she decided to take a whole year and track everything and create data from it. And then she made her decision. Now, I admire her greatly. She is a self-led leader, and I advise anyone out there that is definitely feeling the intensity of competition, maybe the pressure from parents, because that is a very real thing, especially if they're going to competitions and then they're looking at what this studio is doing and what that studio is doing. And I know I've had many years where all of a sudden you can feel like you're parents and supporters are maybe losing faith because all of a sudden a new up and coming dance school or someone else has gotten that special choreographer and they're doing so well, instead of also maybe just seeing that this is a dynamic thing and it can shift from year to year, also depending on what kind of dancers you have within your competition group and your team. Sometimes you can have newer dancers that you're bringing in and encouraging, and other years you can have a mishmash of performers that you're really working on collaborating and unifying in standard and in passion. So they're really important things to weigh up as a studio owner. And if I could say this as a parent, if you're feeling dismayed by competitions, as Chasta recommended, have an open and honest conversation with your studio owner. What are your expectations? And is your child, do you feel like they're growing? I don't believe that every experience has to be a happy, positive experience. I feel like it's part of growth and part of life is having a level of uncomfortability. That doesn't mean we put up with poor behavior or toxic environments. I'm not saying that. But there is also a benefit from being stretched and being in a position where growth is created. And sometimes growth is created from disappointing outcomes. So that's probably where I stand with it. As a judge now, speaking from a judge's position, I honestly never thought I would like being a dance judge, or in Australia we say adjudicator. And the reason after I sold my school that I went into judging was a curiosity. And then I had this idea, I wonder if I could become a dance adjudicator and bring me into the experience and approach it as an experience of mentorship and teaching and learning and growing. In Australia, as a dance adjudicator, you predominantly work by yourself, and you could be judging a competition. For my longest competition I judged was for 14 days straight. So they are long and it's all on you. And there's so many things you need to do as a judge to make sure that your head is in the game as well and that you're focused in giving your absolute best to students. Also in Australia, there is the feedback system, so we can sit and there'll be a scribe. So the scribe will write our comments, and a newer, which has been out for a few years now, about 5-6 years, is voice critique. So there'll be a little microphone hooked up to the computer which gets linked to the students' music, and they get to play their feedback. And that's really good because in real time you're giving feedback that links with their music, so they know exactly where their critiquing is at what point in their routine. Over here in Europe, I have only been part of a panel with no feedback. So the biggest competition, there was a panel, there were 7 of us judges, and all we need to do is give a score. I loved being part of a panel because it felt like you're part of a team, and we sit far enough away from each other so we don't know what anyone else is judging, and eyes on the stage and then down at the iPad giving that mark. I like the feedback system, and again, being on the panel, you're getting more of a variety of probably a balanced result, that for students that might want that feedback, they can walk away maybe upset that they didn't place or do as well as they thought and not actually have that understanding as to why. So another thing which I find really important to create a positive outcome if you are going to go down the road of competitions is it's so important for parents to know their place, for teachers to know their place, so that the student doesn't feel bombarded by these overly critiquing things. They're already getting critiqued by the judge. I highly suggest parents just be the cheerleaders and focus on the process, not the outcome of the performance. So what that looks like is, I really like how you did that pirouette, and I can see that you've worked hard on this in class and that's come across on stage. Just try and keep it positive, and then let the teacher implement the feedback from the judge if it is a feedback system. Just keep it really clean so that the student feels supported and that there's integrity, and I mean there's a system and a structure in place that can best assist that young dancer to feel supported and nurtured throughout this process. I also recommend to buy a video so that your child can actually watch their performance and they can start to get this sense of what they're looking like. I did have a few years where we still did competitions, and we did a mid-year show for probably about 4 years in a row. And I made that mid-year show more musical theatre based. So half of it was musical theatre and the other half was the performance group doing their performance routines and the soloists. And that seemed to work. And a part of growing and evolving is taking on all information, doing your research, having a look at what other people are doing. When I had my school, I would also look not just in the dance industry at other industries. What are they doing and what's working for them? And I'd try and creatively implement some of those things within my industry. One thing I always loved was personal development, and I got a fair few qualifications in the personal development industry. And so I also ran programs for dancers, and that's what part of created my Master Dancer Mindset program, which I have now. That actually developed from so many other smaller programs that I ran from 2010. And I think I started actually in 2006. I ran a group with my friend Jane called Teen Angels. And so that was all for girls on empowerment and using their intuition and also conflict resolution. So that was me bringing my flavor to my school, which I also feel like counterbalanced that competitive side, because I wanted to bring a holistic structure to it. And I didn't really want to have anything that was going to exclude one thing or another, because ultimately I suppose I feel like finding that middle road for you, as long as you're listening and you're being led by what works for you. What I have learnt over the years is that clarity and communication are everything. If you're going to do competitions, make it clear why, how, and with what values. That sets the tone, and it helps protect both you, your staff, your students from being swept up in the pressure or the comparison. One of the things I really admire about Chasta's journey is the way she made her decision. It's leadership that's smart. It's not reactive, it's brave. And I think that's what we can all take away, whatever path we choose. Because at the end of the day, balance is the key. Like I say to my son all the time, not too much of anything. Too much of anything, too much competitions, too few opportunities, too much pressure, too little structure. It all leads to imbalance. The sweet spot is in the monitoring of the expectations, staying attuned to your dancers and having the courage to be self-led in your decisions. There's no one size that fits all, but there is a way to do it with integrity, and that is the real art behind dance education. Thank you for listening, and I would love to hear your feedback. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications so you get notified when a new episode is released. Thank you.